I really just dug into research on how to build resilience, how to build self-care beyond, take a spa day, because it's a lot deeper than that, right? And so I just started researching it with a passion, number one, for my own sanity and to help support my family through that experience. And then, just in natural conversation with colleagues, I saw the opportunity to help them.
Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. My guest today is a nurse who is committed to making a significant and sustainable impact on the nursing profession. Karen Furr is an RN with a master's degree in nursing education, and she's worked for over 15 years in areas such as vascular access, pediatrics, neonatal, and technology-dependent intensive care units, just to name a few. And she's also taught in the clinical practicum and classroom settings in both LPN and BSN programs. However, it's her work as a nurse resilience coach and consultant that truly drives her. In 2020, Karen founded the Resilient Nurse Project in order to fulfill her mission of helping nurses recognize, address, and overcome burnout and compassion fatigue. Welcome to the show today, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I typically like to start these off with just getting to know you a little bit and hearing more about your story. So tell us a little bit about your nursing journey.
Yeah. So first of all, I became a nurse not out of a calling or a passion, but out of a necessity to feed my children. So I found myself, I was actually an English major with an idea of a lofty, publishing career somewhere. And then I found myself in a position of being a single mom with a second baby on the way. And my parents, who are very practical people, my mom is a nurse, they sat me down and said, we're going to support you for 2 years to get through nursing school because we don't want to support you forever. So nursing school was just a choice based on financial, stability. And I think a lot of people have this idea that nursing is this great career because of the money. It's not, we make decent money, but not quite as much as I think some people think. But anyway, so that's how I got into nursing, was out of necessity, and found myself starting a pediatric ICU and absolutely fell in love with it. I really enjoyed getting to know the patients and the families and helping them through these dark times. And about 8 years into that nursing career, I found myself sitting in the emergency room with my own child, my youngest daughter, and she was diagnosed with brain cancer. It was a total shock. I had no forewarning. Her symptoms were like 2 days, and I thought she had a stomach bug. But really, the most remarkable thing in that moment was my first thought when the doctor told me that she had a brain tumor, likely cancer, got to have surgery immediately. My first thought was, I've spent the last 8 years caring for everybody else's children. I don't have the capacity to care for my own. Like, number one, just the physical capacity to do all the things that I know she's going to need. And then the mental and emotional piece, holy cow, how am I going to do this and still be there for my other 2 kids and my husband? And so immediately I realized how much the 8 years I had spent in my nursing career had drained from me. And that's when I realized burnout is a problem. And I started talking to colleagues and realizing that I was not the only person who, experienced this. And so as I went through that experience with my daughter, who's doing great now, by the way.
Good.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that part of the story.
Yeah, she's now 18. So we've been 9 years, and she's cancer-free. She's getting ready to go off to college. So she's doing phenomenal. But as I was navigating how to take care of her and get through that experience, I really just dug into research on how to build resilience, how to build self-care beyond, take a spa day, because it's a lot deeper than that, right? And so I just started researching it with a passion, number one, for my own sanity and to help support my family through that experience. And then, just in natural conversation with colleagues, I saw the opportunity to help them. And so over the years, I continued to research that and got my degree in nursing education so that I could really learn the best ways to deliver information and strategies to other nurses, and then built the Resilient Nurse Project out of that need. That's really cool. And you've had what sounds to be a real intentionality about pursuing that advanced education. Absolutely. So, it's nice to go into it and have that idea of what this is going to look like on the other side. What am I doing this for? As opposed to when you first started in nursing and, you're like, oh, I got to do this to make some money. Exactly. Exactly. Support my family, which, I mean, hey, that's an admirable thing too. There's nothing, bad about that. But, getting back to that burnout topic, I guess, I just want to dive a little deeper into that. So for purposes of your project and what you've seen, how do you define burnout? Yeah, we define it similar to what the World Health Organization has now created as a diagnosis. Finally, they recognized it as the real thing, but it's really three symptoms. Number one is feelings of depletion or exhaustion. And this is beyond the end of a 12-hour shift tired, but it's when you have 3 days off and you still feel depleted and exhausted. That's a big one. The second one is just this increasing distance from the job, a cynicism, a negativity, or resentment about the job that you're doing, where you always go to work in a bad mood, or every response, that you have to a situation is that negative response. And then the third is just this sense of, is what I'm doing making a difference anymore? Like, am I making an impact? Does it even matter? And when you start to have some of those symptoms, any combination of those three, then it's time to really delve deeper. It's more than just a surface level problem of a rough day or a bad patient. It's a deeper issue, right? Of the whole environment that you're in or the situation that you're facing in a buildup of struggles and challenges that you've faced. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess then the natural question after that is like, once you recognize it, what do you do about it? Because you mentioned sustainable resilience. What does that even mean? And how do you go about actually accomplishing that? If that's something, obviously that's what you're trying to shoot for. Yep, exactly. But go through that a little bit for me. Yeah. So everything we do at the Resilient Nurse Project is built on a foundation of 6 pillars of resilience. And what we teach is that if you only have one method of resilience, one coping mechanism that you rely on, in decent times or when small things go bad, that's okay. But when you face major crises or a buildup of crisis or problems over time, that one coping mechanism is no longer enough. And so we teach nurses how to build essentially a resilience toolkit that's based on 6 different foundational pillars, areas of improving your life or strengthening these resilience tools so that your subconscious, no matter what it faces, has a plethora of tools to pull from and can pull from whichever area of resilience or area of strength is going to be most pertinent in that moment. Yeah. Well, and that makes a lot of sense in this, with the idea of when we are learning, to be nurses, we put a lot of tools in our toolbox, exactly. and you try to pick up as many tips and tricks and everything else that you can have to apply to the multitude of situations that you're going to face. Yeah. But we often pay attention to the task-oriented nature of that, and we don't focus on some of the emotional stuff. I mean, I've seen it in my own practice. I got no counseling after seeing my first dead body. Exactly. And exactly. Going through my first code experience, there was nothing there for exploring the emotional side of that. And right. So, and then that's a perfect example that we teach. So like when you have that experience, a lot of times our first thought is to go home and talk to our spouse about it, our significant other. Well, for instance, my husband's a business professor. When I go home and talk to him about seeing a child die from abuse or a horrible accident, he is not prepared to deal with that himself. And then he certainly doesn't have the ability, not the ability. I mean, he's a great listener and he tries really hard, but he doesn't have the right training or tools to then help me cope with something like that.
Yeah, he's not a professional counselor.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so we teach, like, how do you choose who your go-to person is, like who your support people are. And that's one example. So, just like we try to teach our patients, if you have X problem with your kidneys, you're also going to have to deal with some other things, right? It's not isolated. Yeah. So if we build this proactive, holistic, resilient base, then whatever the situation is we face, whether it's a family issue or a major, traumatic situation at work, or a combination of all these little things, we are prepared. Our brains, our minds are prepared to address that much better than if we were already depleted in all those areas. And then we got to come up with the tools.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What do you think it is about nursing in particular that makes us so susceptible to burnout? Because obviously there's life and death situations that we face, but it's not just that.
I think it's a culture, for generations of this acceptance by the nursing profession that that's part of the job, that burnout is normal. It's just part of it. There's nothing you can do about it, that you just have to accept it and deal with it. I think, because that's become the norm, is that this is just expected and you just got to put up with it. Nurses as a profession have allowed employers to push that boundary of what you just have to do, just because it is what it is.
Yeah.
We have to start standing up as a profession, and I think we are, and advocating for ourselves as much as we advocate for our patients, and saying, no, there is a boundary. And I'm sorry if we're short-staffed, but I've already worked overtime and I cannot work anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry. It is what it is. We have to start standing up for ourselves as a collective voice, mm-hmm. and pushing back on those boundaries to say it is not something we're going to accept as just part of the job, that we have to live in a burned out state. So we can accept that we have to build mental toughness. We can accept that there's going to be self-sacrifice at times, but we don't have to accept that that's life consuming, that it's okay for that to consume us outside of the hours that we work in the hospital or at our, wherever we work.
Obviously, hospitals can have a say, nurses should have a say. How can they work together to figure out more of a solution for possibly changing this culture? Because I think a lot of it comes down to identity. And, as nurses, when you introduce yourself to somebody, and this is an American thing anyway, like when you introduce yourself to somebody, oh, well, I'm, Bobby Jones, and I'm a nurse anesthetist, or whatever it is, or, now I say I'm a retired nurse anesthetist. And, but how does that identity part of us, how can we start identifying with other things outside to make it so non-life consuming to be a nurse?
Yeah, I think asking our employees, or requiring our employers, number one, to create a culture of resilience that is proactive, that's not retroactive, or that's not like knee-jerk reaction. So when we're already in crisis mode, that's not the time for you to bring in support services. That's not the time for you to say, oh, we're going to support you with a pizza party or a chaplain that comes to talk to you. No, we need to be building those as part of our nursing orientation, as part of our continuing education. It needs to be part, just as much a skill building necessity as honing your IV skills, or, touching base on how do we handle these drips and these ventilators. Like, it needs to be built as equal importance to the other skills that we learn. And then we also need to, again, as nurses, build those boundaries of here's my limit, and I'm not going to let you guilt me into pushing over my limits.
Yeah. Well, it's clear that you have such a passion for this subject, and I want to dive more into that. So I want to give you a chance to talk about the Resilient Nurse Project, and, more specifically, what exactly is it, and what are the services that you're really offering to people?
Yeah. So the Resilient Nurse Project is just the idea that in whatever ways we can, we are going to teach as many nurses as possible to build a resilient foundation that will carry them through whatever life faces, whether it's at work, at home, or in the in-between, right? In the balance of the two, because let's face it, none of us are just nurses or just wives or husbands, right? We're a balance of all those things. And so the goal is to help as many nurses as possible learn to recognize the symptoms of burnout and how to address and overcome them in various ways. And so we have a variety of ways to do that. We have a course that teaches people the resilient foundations. We also have retreats. We have a book that just came out in May. That's the Resilient Nurse book, which is really awesome because it shares other nurses' stories of how they have used these pillars of resilience in their practice and in their home life. And then we also have a subscription box for nurses, which is a monthly box that comes with a book and some self-care tools that just helps nurses, again, continue to build that foundation of little by little. How can I proactively, increase my resilience, my ability to make decisive action, my ability to choose the right people to lean on in times of struggle or need. It's essentially all these different ways to attack from whatever angle your amygdala, which is always scanning for like threats, right? We're giving it the ability to attack every threat. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. And so, yeah, we have the book, we have the courses, we have the box, and then we also have events, retreats, and summits that we host throughout the year.
Okay, that's really cool. And you mentioned in there about the book. Tell me a little bit about that process, because it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go write a book. Like, it's not easy to do that. So tell me a little bit about that process and how you obviously took some stories from other people. Did you do interviews and, how did that go?
Yeah, so I started with those 6 foundational pillars that we talk about, and the book outlines each of those pillars of resilience and talks about how they apply specifically to nursing. And my research also that led me to those 6 pillars, because I researched a lot of other high trauma professions, military, Navy SEALs, high performing athletes, and what they did to maintain this level of resilience in extreme, sacrifice or extreme demands on their body and minds. And so the book outlines those 6 pillars and where the research came from for those. And then I reached out to nurses in my community and asked them to share their stories, and which of these pillars did they feel the strongest in or most aligned with their story, and allowed them to share their stories in the book. Because it's not about me. It's not about my one story. That's just the spark that kind of ignited the idea. But there are so many other nurses who are finding ways, to deal with hard times or hard situations. And when we share our stories, then it helps other people realize they're not alone, and there are other ways, to kind of work through these challenging things that come up.
Yeah. So, give me, if you have one off the top of your head, give me an example of how somebody has used something from your program, and maybe a story that you heard back from somebody where they were like, "Yeah, I was in this situation, I heard this," and I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but
no, that's okay. I'm prepared for it. So one of my favorite is, and that actually goes back to the culture change in a work setting. So one of my favorites is from the foundational pillar of active optimism, and this is the idea of literally training our brain to balance the amygdala's, threat scanning negative radar with positive thinking, which sounds a little cheesy on the surface, but when you get down into it, it really makes a difference. And so what this person did was create an active optimism box in their break room. And there were little tiny notebooks and pens, and they could decorate it however they want. But basically, they challenged their colleagues to find positive, to write down, like when somebody does something good or when you see something good happening on the unit. And then they would share those in huddle. And over time, it started to become more natural in their conversations or in their huddles or patient handoffs, for these positive statements to come out. And so when somebody it almost became a joke on their unit when somebody would, say something cynical or negative, that the others would go, "Oh, wait a minute, how would we write that in the journal?" But then they really would say, "No, really, how would you rephrase that in a way that's not so negative or draining, right? How could we say that differently or approach that differently?" And it really created this culture change on their unit of looking at things from a positive approach instead of always seeing and addressing and highlighting the negative or the cynicism.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a very pervasive thing in the sense like we view that cynicism as like putting our armor on, and you have to put your armor on in order to be able to take care of people in these kinds of situations. But, you know, along the way, it's very easy to start to lose, I don't want to say your passion, but just your connectedness to your patients in that sense, you know, because you're just, you've got your armor on and you're not letting that emotion come in and damage you. And that can, I feel like that can hurt you in the long haul.
Absolutely.
When that starts to.
You disconnect from the humanity of what you're doing, and it becomes just the task oriented, like a robot in bed that you're caring for. Right. And we don't want to lose that humanity. We don't want to lose that connection. We do want to build boundaries that protect us from carrying, you know, their trauma or their emotions around with us forever, because that can be damaging as well. But we don't want to completely disconnect from the people that we're caring for. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this has been an amazing conversation, and I do want to give you an opportunity. If there's anything that you feel like we missed or whatever, you know, I'd love to hear what you think. So I'll let you do that now.
No, I think we've covered the basic. I mean, again, the main idea is let's proactively build resilience toolkits, ideas, you know, brain exercises that build that natural ability in us to be able to handle things in the moment without completely falling apart or completely being consumed. And, you know, we talk about work-life balance. I don't think there ever really is a complete balance, but when you're on this like pendulum of stress and relief, but you can stay more towards the middle instead of always having these huge swings, I think that's when you have a more, you know, sense of well-being and a life that you enjoy living. And that's really what our goal is at the Resilient Nurse Project, is to help nurses find that without having to just completely abandon the profession, because that's not necessary, right? We don't have to get away from the bedside or just quit nursing in order to be well. You can be a nurse and be, you know, and be in a good space. Like, it's possible. And we're just helping nurses figure out how to do that, because right now in America, employers as a whole are not doing that.
Yeah. I love the idea of really taking that and having it be more of an integrated process, as opposed to, you know, like you mentioned, that trauma response where like, okay, well, now we have to deploy all this stuff because something happened, instead of, you know, like we need to be equipped with those tools to begin with. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. I want to give people a chance to get a hold of you and learn more about the Resilient Nurse Project. How can they do that, Karen?
Yeah, so our website is rnproject.org. That's the best place to find us. We are on Facebook and Instagram at the Resilient Nurse Project. But our website, rnproject.org, is where all of our updated events will be listed always. All the links are there. The book link is listed there. We also have some corporate training. So if nurse leaders are interested in having us come in and train their staff as a whole, we also have that available. So everything's on the website, and you can reach out to us through there.
So cool. Karen, thank you so much for being here today and being so open with, you know, your story and, you know, the conversation itself. I think this is one that this is going to be really helpful for some folks.
I hope so. I really do. Thank you for having me on.
I can truly appreciate what Karen is trying to accomplish with the Resilient Nurse Project. She's one of the few people out there who's trying to help heal the healers. I had several moments during the show where I just felt like Karen was speaking directly to some of those emotions that I felt during my own healthcare career. And what we've been doing so far isn't really working to combat it. And I'm so glad that she's developing and implementing systems that approach the problems of burnout and compassion fatigue in a whole new way. My real aha moment during the conversation was when she pointed out the reactionary nature of the solutions that have been presented so far by hospitals and healthcare executives. Nurses and other healthcare providers who are in the trenches deserve to work in supportive environments. Changing the way that we think about how we provide those environments is key to solving the problem of burnout. Karen is on the front lines of that change that is required to fix our current unsustainable systems. That's going to do it for the show today. Make sure you check out Karen's website at rnproject.org to get access to the Resilient Nurse book and learn more about what she's actually up to. Until next time, though, be safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.